try a few things before we start. Nope, not working. Okay, here we go then. Aloha and welcome to the Bear Wozniak Adventure. I'm your adventure guide, Bear Wozniak, and being a Christian is to be on an adventure. We believe at Deep Adventure Ministries that the most radical thing you can do in life is abandon yourself to the wild, and we do mean wild, adventure of God's will. We live in a world of adversity, but God's intention is for us to turn that adversity into adventure and to use that adversity in our life to strip away all of the things that prevent us from abandoning ourselves completely to God's will. There's nothing greater, more adventurous thing we can do in life than just to desire what God desires. Because look at the universe. Just look around you. Look at the wildness around you. I'm looking right now out at the ocean, beautiful surf, and then I'm looking off into the horizon, up into the sky, where we just recently launched a rocket here at Cocoa Beach, up into the stars, into the black holes, the quasars. Our very universe screams to us of two things: wildness and of order at the same time. And so, when we look at God, there's a sense of wonder and awe that we need to have in before Him. There's this great sense of wildness and freedom that God has to be who He is, and God wants us to be who we are. God wants us to be exactly who we are. He doesn't want to change us to be something we're not. When we were conceived, God infused in our bodies a spiritual, rational soul. We are a human body, and we are also a spiritual, rational soul. And God's will for us is for His grace to perfect our nature, that we become more of who He created us to be. And so often we think of that as in our modern world, we think of as freedom as being freedom to do whatever we want. And really, what freedom is freedom from the dominations of the passions that we have in our life that draw us into more and more pain and more separation from God. But we're here today doing a kind of a cool show. I have on line with me our producer and longtime friend and also oftentimes guest on our show, Bill Snyder. Aloha, Bill.
Aloha, Bear. It's always great to be with you.
How's the weather up there in Chicago?
It is warming up. It's going to be about 50 degrees today, but then it's going to drop right on back down to 20. So
Wow.
we got a little reprieve, but we're going back down for the weekend and for the March for Life
Oh, how
in
cool.
Chicago.
Wow.
Yeah.
I apologize for everybody. I've got a little bit of a scratchiness to my throat. I was just in the Holy Lands. Just got back a week ago today, or maybe tomorrow. And so had a great time there. But we actually walked the Via de la Rosa about 5 in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, in a cold rain, up to the Holy Sepulchre, and it was windy and cold most of the time we were there. So a lot of us kind of came back a little bit worn down. So I'm making a comeback though, but I do apologize for the quality of my voice. We're gonna do a unique. Yeah, I'm sorry, Bill. Go ahead.
It's all good, Bear. You sound great.
Hey, we're going to do a really cool show today. Actually, we've never done anything like this before. We're going to do, I guess, what they call it a mailbag show. Don't they call it something like that, where people have written in and made comments or questions, and Bill's going to throw them at me. And, a lot of times I'm pretty much overwhelmed and have no idea the answers. But I may give you at least some thoughts. And, Bill, when you throw out these questions, go ahead and feel free to respond, too, and give your comments and thoughts on it, too. So we've gotten these from people through Facebook Live, through my Bears Man Cave group also. And so we're ready to roll. Bill, you want to start out with one of the questions?
Sure. So I think, there's a couple really great, good ones. I think maybe to get started, let's talk about, Bear, how can we get more men engaged in the faith life of the parish?
I like that question. When I was in Israel, we went to the wall, of course. And Jerusalem is an ancient walled city. We went to that. We went to, basically you're either inside Jerusalem or you're not. There's only a few access points, and there's this great wall, and it reminds me of the scripture Nehemiah when he came back from captivity and challenged the men to rebuild the walls that were falling down. I mean, there were cows and wild animals roaming through the streets of Jerusalem. They had neglected the city walls. And so men began to rebuild the walls. And what's interesting about Nehemiah, I don't think it's a boring chapters at all. The first 3 or 4 or 5 chapters are just naming that this man and his family rebuilt the wall from this section to that section. And then this other man and his family rebuilt the wall from this section to that section. And so the emphasis is on the men and their families, the domestic church, rebuilding these walls. And so, and then as they got more successful, their enemies began to attack them. So one man would stand with a sword or a spear and a shield to protect the other man while he was building. And the men who were carrying supplies would carry like a brick in one hand and a sword in the other, prepared to fight. And so I think the key to the way that, tell me exactly how the question was phrased again, Bill.
It just says, how can we get more men engaged in the faith life of the parish?
Okay, this is what I'm going to say. You need to get real, first of all. And if you're a man asking this question, then it's up to you to make it happen. And the best way to make that happen is to find one, or better yet, 2 other men that are like-minded. It says a thrice-wound cord is not easily broken. We know to stabilize a chair, it's easier to stabilize a 3-legged stool than a 4-legged stool. So if you can find one other man and then one other man and begin to get together and nurture your common desire to go deeper with God. And it doesn't need to be, although I'm a big fan of That Man Is You and programs like that, a lot of times that isn't where you start. You may not want to start in the church basement. You may want to start by saying, hey, let's the 3 of us go to Mass once a week, the early morning Mass, and then let's go to breakfast or coffee afterwards, and let's talk story, as we say in Hawaii. In other words, we're not going to talk about politics. We're not going to talk about sports. We may talk about the scriptures spoken that day at Mass. We'll talk about what's going on in our lives, what challenges we have personally in our moral life, in our prayer life, what's going on with our children, with our families. So men need to start getting real. That's why we have the man cave phenomena happening. I turned on this Facebook group, a private Facebook group called Bear's Man Cave, and one by one, men are joining the man cave, and you can only join by going to deepadventure.com or bearwozniak.com. It's the same place. And you join, and then you have access to this private Facebook group, and the men there get real with each other, sharing, this is what's happening. My son's in the hospital because of a drug overdose, or the different challenges men face. Often, men face loneliness. Men, in the midst of having a wife and children, they're lonely in a sense for male friendship, where they can really talk with each other in a way only men can talk with each other and get real with each other. So we have that men's group called the Bears Man Cave, and we every 2 or 3 weeks get together, live video chat, have a meetup, and we're reading through my book, Deep Adventure: The Way of Heroic Virtue, which is meant to get men talking. And so, but what's come out of that man cave, a lot of the men are starting their own man caves. In other words, they're getting together at their house with friends, not at the church, or they're getting together at a sports bar someplace, getting together, in their living room once a week or once every other week, and they're going through my book or another book, or there's so many things to do. Basically, to start with prayer, and then getting to know each other a little bit, and then reading a book and commenting and talking about what you're reading, and really open up the dialogue to go deep. So it doesn't always have to start in the church. It can start in the domestic church, which is your home. Don't think that your home isn't a church. And then from your church home, or from getting together for breakfast, you can take that core group of men and then develop a program like That Man Is You. But the key to developing a vibrant parish is to be true to the magisterium of the church, and for men to begin to get together in small groups and encourage each other. I hope that kind of answered it.
I think it definitely does. I think it definitely does. So let's move to teenagers next, Bear, if we can. There's a couple different questions, but I think the best way to summarize this is why can't we keep teens in the church? After they get confirmation, they seem to think all their sacraments are done and they don't need the church anymore.
Okay, well, we're gonna, we're coming up on a hard break. Thank God I get to take
Oh,
a little
sure.
break here. Think about that. But I would basically, one of my statements would be, it's your fault. It's the father's fault. And we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about that. This is Bear Wozniak. I have that raspy voice because I was just hiking the hills of Jerusalem in the cold and the rain with Father Don Calloway and all that group, and want to do a shout out to all of them. And we're talking with Bill Snyder, who's the producer of the show. He's the one who really makes this show happen, and is sometimes a guest on our show, and has his own podcast. What's your not a podcast? It's a radio show. What's your radio show called, and how can they find it, Bill?
Super easy. If you type in your podcatcher, your podcast thing, Patchwork Heart Radio, you'll find it. The name of the program is called Young Catholics Respond, and it's a weekly podcast and program out there on also airs on Evangelism Radio, which is a Protestant Protestant network out in Baltimore, and I'm the only Catholic show, or the only authentically Catholic show on Evangelism Radio.
I can dig it. We'll be right back. This is Bear Wozniak with the Bear Wozniak Adventure. Aloha and welcome back to the Bear Wozniak Adventure. I'm the only person you've ever heard on Catholic radio, or on any radio, or on any TV, or any podcast, anywhere in the entire universe that can say that he tandem surfed in Tel Aviv, Israel 2 weeks ago. That's right. I flew into Tel Aviv to join Father Don Calloway for a tour of Israel with him and a small group of 50 other people. But we arrived a couple days early, and Cindy and I paddled out in Tel Aviv. It was so cool. We got there. It was like big but out-of-control waves. Crashed that deep sleep of jet lag. Got up in the morning and looked out at perfect chest-to-head high waves. And we walked across the street from the hotel that Father Don Calloway had set up for us. Walked across the street and said, let's go see if we can find some surf and a surfboard. Found this cool surf shop. Guy Ronnie there, I said, hey, you know how to surf? I go, no, don't know how to surf. He goes, oh, really? Well, let me give you some lessons. I go, actually, here's what we do. And I showed him a picture of me lifting Cindy over my head in a tandem surf lift. And he said, dude, you can use my board. And he had a fairly big board, one almost big enough to tandem surf on. So we paddled out, and the people in the lineup, there were only about 20 of them there, were just like, dude, I never saw tandem surfing. First they thought we were just kooks, and then we drop into the first wave, and they're like, oh, my God, they'd never seen anything like that. So beautiful. And they just were so gracious, And we paddled out, and we got another wave. It was tricky to catch the waves because they were hollow, and we didn't have quite the right equipment in our surfboard. We couldn't quite get in early enough. But we were able to do some overhead lifts, and then we paddled to the beach, and we walked up a little bitty hill, just a little 10-foot ledge. And there's a guy standing there kind of with his arms across his chest looking at me kind of stern. And he goes, you're Bear Wozniak, aren't you? And I go, well, yes, I am. And he goes, I'm Galen. I love to see you tandem surf. So then we started talking story. I go, my friend Doc Paskowitz, he brought surfing to Israel. And he goes, do I? And he brought us into his surf shop. And here's a picture of my friend Doc, who's recently passed away, and surfing with his father. So it goes way, way, way back to when Doc first brought surfing to Israel. So yeah, we got to surf in Tel Aviv. So I know that there's no one in the universe who can say that they surfed in Tel Aviv, tandem surfed ever, so we were stoked to bring that there and to experience the shaloha, as I call it, the shalom and the aloha of Israel. But we have a real cool show today. We have Bill Snyder on. He's the producer of our radio show and has his own podcast too. And we're going through a unique thing today. I think it's called like a mailbag show. He's asking questions that people sent to us on Facebook and or through the email. And so I don't know what's coming up. I don't know if I'm capable of even answering any of them, but we shall see. So part two, Bill, you had started to ask a question. Can you reiterate it for me?
Yeah, sure. So we were talking about teens in the Catholic church, and how do we keep them there? So simply the question says, why can't we keep teens in the church? After they get confirmation, they seem to think all their sacraments are done and they don't need the church anymore.
Well, the way I would say it is I was at the Napa Institute in California this summer, and Rick Santorum spoke. And he basically took us out to the shed, as we used to say, gave us a good whipping, and he just looked at us. He goes, if you're not happy with the deterioration in America right now, it's your fault. And so, although we can be the best parents in the world and our children have a mind of their own, they can do whatever they want. But I would say that the predominant, the primary reason for this situation is because it's your fault. And I'm not speaking to the women, I'm speaking to the men. It's your fault. And how do you deal with that? Statistics tell us that when a man doesn't attend church, but his wife is faithful and does go and take the children, that after they're adults, about a third of them will continue in their faith as continuing to participate in the sacraments and go to Mass. But where the man takes the children to church and the woman doesn't, closer to 75 to 80% of them stay. And you may be doing that. But I would say, we know leaders, when the people of Israel said, we want a king, Samuel anointed Saul. And Saul was a cool dude. He was taller than anybody else. He was handsome looking. But his life prior to being king was to be a mule herder, a donkey herder. You push and force and pull and drag donkeys around. But David was a shepherd. And shepherds lead their flock, and their flock knows them by name. And I would say as a father, are you leading your family? Are you leading them by example? You can do all the programs in the world and talk all you want, but if you're not getting up an hour earlier before your family does and spending an hour in prayer, if your family doesn't see you in love with Jesus, if all you are as a father is telling them these are the religious things you need to do, you need to go to church, this is the right thing to do, this is the wrong thing to do, but they don't see a man in love with God, they're going to drift because they want reality in their lives. The most important thing you can do to keep your children in the faith is to be madly in love with Jesus. And Jesus commanded us to be crazy in love with God. He said, you shall love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, strength, and mind. So get crazy in love with Jesus. In the mornings, find your morning man cave or man corner and spend your, maybe it's only a half hour in the morning, but maybe it's 2 hours at night or 20 minutes at night or praying the rosary as you drive. But lead your children. Let them see you being madly in love with Jesus, and let them see you, for example, changing the channel on the TV that they're watching, or grabbing them away from their computer game and saying, let's go to the hardware store together, or let's work on the yard together, let's go on a hike together. I remember I used to take my sons up into the mountains. I trained them. I trained all my children. I'm a second-degree ninja black belt, and I trained them in martial arts. 2 of them I got to test to get their black belt. And I would take them up in the mountains at night. And they would moan and groan and hate it. But then when they got older, they would grab their friends and take them up too. So it's all about leadership, men. And if your children aren't continuing in their faith, it's probably your fault. And I'm just going to lay it on the line like that. I mean, it's not always, but I'm saying 80% of the time, it's your fault. Okay, Bill, next question.
All right.
Or do you want to make a comment? You want to make a comment about that?
The only thing I'd say to follow that one up, just as a youth minister myself, is dads, we can use you as catechists. It is incredibly hard.
Hey, man.
I think we have like 3 male or 4 male, 5 male catechists in my entire parish that help with high school formation, or between my 2 parishes. We need exponentially more of you.
You know what I was
step it up,
man. When I was in Jerusalem, I heard that same thing. Hey, I got this really cool sound effect board, and I just think I growled, and my sons put these sound effects on. I don't know if I can use them all, but can I try one?
Sure, try.
Okay,
it.
I don't know if it's going to work. We'll see. Probably not. Okay, I've been gone for a while, so
Okay.
it's not activated. Okay, so next question or comment.
Yeah. So again, talking about that leadership, this is a good question. How can men lead the way in marriage with church approved NFP? It's remarkably powerful seeing men lead the way in terms of encouragement and enthusiasm in this area.
Well, that's a good question. I'm probably not the expert for it, but I can say this. One of the things that, well, first of all, be open to life, but of course, you can guide the things that are happening in your life through natural family planning. Isn't it funny how, here we are on a radio show, Catholics, and we use these little acronyms and stuff. People have no idea what we're talking about. Natural family planning just means that the Catholic Church teaches that you can't, that contraceptive care such as condoms or the pill and things like that are contrary to being open to life. But because we believe in nature, we can use natural family planning methods, which would be, for example, timing when a man and women have intercourse and trying to limit their family size that way. But that always leaves them open to God desiring to give them new life. When I was a non-Catholic, when I had left the church for a while and came back, this is kind of a tragic thing, kind of real personal, but we were in tremendous pressure from my ex-wife, who that marriage was annulled, mother, to limit the size of our family. And at the time we had 3 children, she went and received a tubal ligation, I believe is what it's called, or had her tubes tied. And I remember praying, Lord, if this is, I didn't even go because I was opposed to it happening. And I just said, Lord, if this isn't your will, cause this to fail. And I remember in the middle of the night, one night, waking up and realizing that this is just a few months later, that my wife was going to be pregnant. I had a dream that we were going to have a new child, and his name would be Joshua, and we did. So in spite of that, we had this beautiful son, Joshua, who my sons Joshua and Shane, they're the ones that are the producer, the directors, and the videographers, and all the magic behind Long Ride Home. So the key thing as Catholics is we need to learn to be open to life. And then we can learn how to try to plan our family, but within that, the scope of God's will through natural family planning. And you can go to Catholic websites and find out more about that. It's kind of a brief answer, but we got to take a hard break. Bill Snyder will be right back. He's kind of helping with this mailbag show. This is your adventure guide, Bear Wozniak, with the Bear Wozniak Adventure. Aloha and welcome back to the Bear Wozniak Adventure. I'm your adventure guide, Bear Wozniak. Today we're doing, it's kind of the beginning of the new season. We're doing a mailbag type show. We've had people sending messages to me on Facebook and other means to bring us some questions. And we've been talking about natural family planning. Hey, Bill, can you repeat that question again? And we'll kind of go into part 2 of it.
Oh, sure. Let me scroll back up here on the Facebook feed. It says, how can men lead the way in marriage with church-approved NFP? It's remarkably powerful seeing men lead the way in terms of encouragement and enthusiasm in this area.
Okay, so we just answered part of that. The other thing is that we need to be open to life in this world. That's basically a culture of death. When I was at the Napa Institute this summer, I keep repeating the experience there. Archbishop or Chaput talked about answering the question, what's the key to evangelizing the world? He had just written a book called How to Live in a Post-Christian Era. And he said the whole key is to have kids, raise them in the church. That will change the world. So that's not a lead your neighbor to Christ next door type of thing, which of course is important, but at the deepest level, it's through the domestic church, having family. And I'm seeing in the new evangelization large families again. And I think there's going to be a lot of saints coming out of the children that those families are having and a lot of vocations. So in this world, we need to be open to life. And the other thing about contraceptive care and things like that, it's the only thing you see in medicine where the doctor is going against the oath to do no harm. You actually harm a woman's body. when you kill off certain of the natural, um, um, you know, biochemistry within her. So a lot of harm is being to women physically and hormonally, to their emotions and psychologically and every other way by using these contraceptive means. So be true to your faith. And if you don't understand why natural family planning, research it. Go to the Catholic websites and find out more about it. Probably one of the most dramatic things you could do is to read and understand John Paul II's theology of the body, which I love. I've read, I listened to, or I've studied all 135 or whatever it was of his sermons that I mean his what he gave at his audiences, and you can certainly read great books by Christopher West and others to understand more about being open to life. Okay, next question. You want to say anything about that, Bill?
No, I think you covered pretty much it wonderfully. So great job. Uh, let's talk. There's so many questions about men and pornography, but I think this one might be the most descriptive. So, men and pornography, men and their sons. How do we raise faithful young men in today's world? Men and their wives. How to be a real man and a loving husband. Men in the quest for adventure. Something I'm constantly torn by: the need for adventure and the need to be a husband and father.
Okay,
What is a real man?
That sounds like two different questions for me. I'm going to start first with a pornography question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and then we'll talk about, if you can bring that other one up again to me about adventure, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
Pornography, when I was young, I mean, if you saw a Playboy magazine in the corner of someone's house, that was like, for a young guy, that was like mind blowing. It was so rare to see anything like that. But now, men are under full-on attack, and especially our young men. Pornography and the pornography websites and things like that are just considered to be a natural part of their growing up. That pornography is just seemed to be normal, and people who don't think pornography is right, they're crazy, or their morals are too restricted. I would ask men one question: when you view pornography, do you feel shame? And of course you do. And why is that? Because at the very core of your being, you are totally abandoning your masculinity when you do that. Because as a man, your role is to protect and to provide, and especially to stand in the gap between women and the most vulnerable among us from being objectified, to be made into objects instead of persons. And so when men view pornography and the results that come with that, the men I talk to, they all, there's a sense of shame that goes with that. Why is that? In the deepest core of your being, as much as you rationalize it, you feel shame. It's because you've not only sinned against, the people that you're viewing or whatever, but you've sinned against your very nature as a man. Your very nature is to protect women and to raise them up in their nobility. And so how do you fight pornography? There's a lot of exterior ways you can do that. I know Matt Fradd has written a lot about it, and there's a program, I believe it's called Covenant Eyes, that you can put on your software, on your different computers and things. But the whole key to me in this whole area is, sin is missing the mark. I forget how you say the word in Hebrew and in the Greek now, so I won't try to pronounce it. But in both the Old Testament and in the New Testament, sin is actually an archer's term, and it means to miss the mark. And so it has to do with where your focus is. When you're firing an arrow, you're firing that. It's where you look is where that arrow is going to go. I know, like when we're tandem surfing. One of the first things I coach, we have 60 different lifts we do when we're out in the water surfing. When I'm coaching someone, a tandem surfing partner, I'll tell her, do this technique, do this technique, do this technique, and then your eyes need to focus here. During your leap, you focus here. Once you're up and in the lift, you focus here. And as a tandem surfer, most of the world-class tandem surfers I know, the men, they can tell when their tandem partner, when the woman her eyes just move from right to left, they can feel it that dramatically, even when they're surfing a big wave, because they can sense that the woman isn't locked into her lift, and there's some sort of change in her balance. So it all has to do with focus. You can resist the devil and he will flee, and that's important. You need to give no occasion, give no occasion for sin. Do not put yourself in vulnerable positions. But the most incredible, most important thing you can do in your own personal life, man, is to love Jesus. And if you spend an hour every day in prayer, if you're, for example, taking on the discipline of the liturgy of the hours and praying 3 times a day, doing the office of readings, or going to mass every day, or praying the rosary every day, this will fade into the past because it is, you don't want to interfere with this beautiful, loving relationship that you have with Jesus. Now they did. I heard. I don't know how accurate this study was, but I heard a study done where they asked Protestant ministers, "How many of your men deal with the issue of pornography?" And they'd say, "Well, hardly any, maybe 10 or 20%." And then they asked Catholic priests how many of the Catholic men have issues with pornography, and they would say 60, 70%. And the reason why the Catholic priests answered like that isn't because the Protestant men are any more holy. It's just that Catholic men go to confession and the priests know. And so it's a very real danger. And the best way I know to deal with that is to spend time in prayer, to take on the full armor, to meditate on Scripture, and to resist the devil, and he will flee. There's some people that have addictive type personalities, and they need to probably deal with that in a more profound way. But for most of us, just dudes, just fall in love with Jesus. Love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and these other things just fade away. And the last thing you want to do is look at pornography that's going to interfere with your relationship with Jesus. And of course, viewing pornography is going to interfere with your relationship with your spouse. And if you're not married yet, it's going to interfere with your future spouse. So, you men who are single now, you should be praying and fasting and going to mass for your future wife, because she's alive right now, and you as a man should already be interceding for her, already praying for her every day for God's protection and provision, and you should be protecting your own virtue so that you can give that to her. Anything you want to add to that?
I think you cover the topic in such a great way. The only thing I would mention as a young man is where you talked about the priests knowing in confession
Yeah.
how many times utilize the sacrament of confession. I mean, I think that in addition to the prayer, in addition to all of that, every day, utilize the sacrament of confession, and don't be afraid to bring that to confession. I know Chris Stefanik. I know a bunch of the big Catholic speakers that are out there on the circuit talk about that a lot as well. Just using the sacrament of confession helps us defeat sin.
You may have to go to confession every day for a while,
right?
But you do.
Right.
But you go there and you face the reality of it. And I'm so glad you brought that up. I had it on my thoughts because, of course, so many men, by the way, that I know that I'm interviewing on my show, their whole pivotal point of conversion was going to confession. That's when they first encountered God. So, or in a personal way, or return to God. We have Bill Snyder hosting with us today. He's our producer of our show, and we're kind of doing a mailbag show. We'll be right back. This is Bear Wozniak with the Bear Wozniak Adventure. Aloha and welcome back to the Bear Wozniak Adventure. I'm your host, Bear Wozniak, and I have Bill Snyder, who's the producer of our show, working with me today. You don't usually hear his voice because we're kind of having a mailbag type show where we're answering questions and responding to comments that we've received. And I want to remind everybody to go to our website. It's bearwozniak.com or deepadventure.com. Both those will get you to our website. And go to our web store. You guys, we've done so much. We've got so many cool things. Of course, my 2 books are there, Deep in the Wave, bestseller, Deep Adventure, The Way of Heroic Virtue. We have all kinds of T-shirts and we have the Warrior Rosary, and we have I don't know, we have motorcycle patches from Long Ride Home. We got everything there. And when you go to our web store, oh my God, this is how we support our ministry. So you're going there really helps us. And please go and consider giving a one-time gift or giving a weekly gift to us. And want to invite the men to please come and join the Man Cave, Bear's Man Cave. You can only join it by going to our website. But once you do, we unlock the entrance to the cave, and you get to be part of a private Facebook group called Bear's Man Cave, and have the encouragement of a lot of men, including men like Bill Snyder, who's helping me host this episode. And we have Man Cave meetups every 2 or 3 weeks. We do a video chat, and we just talk story. We get to know one of the guys really well, and then we go through my book, Deep Adventure, The Way of Heroic Virtue, and have a cigar, and sometimes have a shot of whiskey. What we tell people is, we have our 7 Virtues cigar sampler set that I hand-chosen. It's private label, and those labels on the cigars, you can't enjoy the whole cigar without unpeeling one of the labels. I'm peeling the label, and each of the cigars has one of the 7 virtues in Latin and in English, and then a Romanesque type painting of one of the 7 virtues, the women that represent those. But inside that label is a comment about that virtue. So to have that cigar and share it with a buddy is a great way to open up a conversation with someone that may not otherwise be open to evangelization. And of course, so we encourage everybody. We have our Man Cave meetups, and the men may have a beer or a shot of whiskey, but the virtue of moderation must always be considered when you're having a cigar or having a drink. We're not saying you should have, be imbibing in more than one drink when we have our show and things like that. But at the same time, we are men. As Archbishop Wensky told me when we rode motorcycles to Key West and we had a cigar down in Little Havana and a shot of whiskey, I go, how can we do this? And he goes, hey, we're not Baptists. We're Catholics. We can enjoy life a little bit. But to do that in moderation is the key. Okay, my friend, Bill Snyder's opening up the mailbag, looking for the hardest questions, I hope. And I think you were about to talk about something about adventure or something like that.
Yeah. So men in the quest for adventure, something I'm constantly torn by, the need for adventure and the need to be a husband and father. What is a real man, and how not to be a wussified man, but still sensitive?
Well, just be like Bill Snyder, our producer. Well,
Right.
first of all, I don't see any conflict with adventure and being a good husband and a good father. To me, that's the greatest adventure. I remember when I was in high school social studies class, trying not to nod off, so boring. And and in my kind of reverie there, my little daydreaming, the thought suddenly occurred to me, this is when I was a junior in high school, that I could have a child, that I could actually father a child, that I could be a husband. But what really blew my mind was that I could have a child, that because of me, a whole new eternal being, not eternal, but a being that would live forever, would come into existence into this world. It blew my mind. And from that moment, everything in my life changed. All of my decisions were based on that reality. I worked 2 or 3 jobs in high school. I didn't go to certain parties. I sought a profession in college, not so much that would give me intellectual satisfaction, but that would give me money so I could provide for my family. My life ever since has been focused on that. I can't think of a greater adventure than to be given a kuleana, stewardship over young lives, and having a being in your midst that is going to live forever. Starting upmost, of course, with the wife, because they say that the greatest thing you can do for your children is to love their mother. What more great adventure could you have than to build, in a sense, your own castle, to build a home with an attitude and an excellence and a nobility, and to serve them with humility, and to be super abundant in the way that you serve them, protect them, provide for them. The very nature of a man is to be adventurous, but the ultimate adventure is to procreate. Men, by their very nature, procreate. You may not even be procreating real children, but you may be evangelizing and bringing new souls to the kingdom. Our very nature is to provide, to go the extra mile, not just to provide enough, but super abundantly, like Jesus did on the cross when he released superabundant grace, to procreate, to provide, to protect. And that means you stand in the gap. And one of the ways you protect is by leading by example, getting up early, having your children see you pray, coaching their little league teams, showing up at their football games, grabbing them away from their computer games and going for a hike with them. What greater adventure can you have than to have within your kuleana? In Hawaiian, the name kuleana, the word kuleana, means much more than just responsibility or stewardship. It's like owning a castle. It's yours to take care of. What greater adventure could you have? How can you possibly confuse adventure, thinking that it's anything different than building your own domestic castle, your own domestic church, and developing and nurturing people that will live forever, and thinking that the impact of your children and your children's children's children by your nurturing and taking, what greater adventure could that be? I mean, I've always had a life of, I've skydived and I've motorcycle ridden and I've ridden big waves and I've run with the bulls and all kinds of things. But all that is preparing me for the real adventure, which is to raise my children to live life to the fullest. You want to make a comment, Bill?
I think that you do a wonderful job answering that as well, Bear. I think the amazing thing about being a real man is that, and not to be a wussified man, the way we see it on TV in Hollywood, all these wussified men. I think that just, as you said, be men of prayer and also be men willing to be men of service is basically what I hear you talking about. Be ready to serve your children, be ready to serve your wife, and as Jesus says, that's the greatest thing you can do, right? Wash the feet of other people, and you won't be a wuss if you serve. You'll get to go on some of the greatest adventures.
Amen. Oh yeah, amen. And you know what? As far as being wussify it to the max, dudes. Open your wife's car door. Bring her a flower every day. Find unique and special ways to show her that you love her. Hold your children. Put your hands on their faces with your palm on their cheeks. Have them look to you and tell them, "I love you. I love you just the way you are." Say the words again and again and again. I love you. Don't just be someone who says, "Well, didn't I show you I love you when I did all this work and provided for you?" You need to hold your children and tell them again and again and again. Let the last words that you say to them when you get off the phone be, "I love you." Okay, we got one more minute or two. Bill, give me a fast one.
All right, this one might be able to work. I often confront the balance between being a strong Catholic man and controlling anger and impatience. How do you do that?
Now that really makes me upset, and I'm impatient with that guy for even asking that. No, I don't. I mean, I think again, when God wants to teach you patience, He will put you in the opposite mold. He'll put you in a situation that really requires a lot of patience. So first of all, before you ask God to teach you patience, be real careful because you're probably in for it. My solution to that is that can only come through a life of grace. Of course, there's people that need to go to anger management because they have a lot deeper issues. And anger turned inward can become such a depressing place to live. But anger really is to me having expectations of others. And really, we need to change that and just have expectations of ourselves. When you try to hold people to your expectations, you're always going to be disappointed. And I don't think that's a really good answer for it. But if you're in a situation that's causing you frustration, turn your anger in a masculine way, turn it into determination. When you're in a situation that's causing you frustration and anger, change the situation. And you can turn that anger. It says, be angry, but sin not. Turn that anger into determination. And if you can't in a righteous way change the situation, and you can't, then you can try to change yourself. You either accept it or change it But either way, you have to rely on, again, I always go back to an hour every day with prayer will give you tremendous perspective on your life and give you the grace to live your life and, of course, living the sacraments. We got to go, you guys. Go to our website, bearwosnick.com, or deepadventure.com takes you there, too. And join us on our quest. Thank you, Bill Snyder, for co-hosting with me today.
Of course, always a pleasure, Bear. Always enjoy keeping you surfing and riding the waves, man.
The waves of the Holy Spirit. Okay, everybody, we'll be back next week. Thank you for joining us. Ahui ho, aloha.